Now, the region has been analyzing the possible impact of the UK's decision to leave the EU and what it could have on the Caribbean. Two regional analysts weighed in on the matter. More from Candice Ming.
Will Brexit have an impact on the Caribbean? A Jamaican political analyst and an expert on international trade policy from St. Lucia say yes. Richard Crawford reasons that providing the European Union remains the same following Britain's leave, it brings into question the relationship regional countries have with Britain and the rest of the European Union. The same question was posed to trade policy expert Richard Peterkin.
We're still not 100% sure what the overall consequences are going to be and the impact it might have on Britain, European Union, or the world for that matter. We see some of the short-term consequences, such as the pound and the going down against the dollar and the euro, and it makes world global markets a little jittery, and shares have gone down a bit. Now, whether that's going to last, we don't know. But anything at this present moment that has an impact on world financial markets is bound to have some kind of knock-on effect on the Caribbean as a whole, because we've gone through a period of slow growth with difficulties in foreign direct investment, etc. We definitely do not need at this point anything that's going to make investors more nervous than they are.
In terms of the pros and cons for the Caribbean, both analysts agree that it differs per country. For Jamaica, Mr. Crawford says among the pros is a redirection of trade relations with Europe.
The pros are that you would have two entities that you're going to have to develop trade relations with or maintain trade relations with. Two sources. You would have to have trade relations and other kinds of economic and political relations, both with the United Kingdom, which is now out of the EU, as well as with the countries who remain in the EU or any other formation that comes up. The cons, at the present moment, our trade relations with the European Union, for example, are a little disadvantageous to the Caribbean anyway. And I know that the Caribbean countries have individual relations with the European Union. And we were warned not to do that, but each Caribbean state signed its own agreement with the European Union. And I don't think we have benefited from it. So as far as I am seeing now, I don't think you can get much more difficult than that. The European Union has, of course, in turn, subsidized and financed a lot of programs in our own country and in other parts of the Caribbean. The question would be, well, if they're going to cut that or if they're going to scale it down, we will have to wait and see. But that is a possibility.
On the contrary, Mr. Peterkin says he can't at the moment clearly identify the pros.
I'm not sure exactly what the pros are going to be of Brexit. I've read a lot of stuff giving the arguments for both sides before the referendum. Looking at it from a pro side, it seemed to me that a lot of the arguments for had to do with Britain and its dependence on the EU and the cost of being a member of EU, very little of which really had an impact on the Caribbean as a whole. Certainly one of the cons is, if in fact there is going to be a long-term impact on, let's say, the value of the pound against the US dollar and the maybe interest rates in the UK, the ability of investors from the UK to make investments in the Caribbean, it makes us nervous because, in St. Lucia, for example, the UK used to account for 25% of our stayover visitors. That's been going down because of the economy in the UK not being all that great. The pound, if it's weak against the US dollar, our currency is pegged to the US dollar, so our destination and a lot of others in the Caribbean become more expensive to UK visitors, and so clearly it's going to have an impact on tourism in St. Lucia. And just as significantly, the UK investors have been, I would say, the majority of the investors in the Caribbean have tended to come from the UK, other than maybe in oil in Trinidad, it was from the US, but certainly in things like tourism properties, real estate properties, etc. A lot of that investment was coming from the UK. And if those UK investors are now affected by a weaker pound, weaker shares, inability to borrow money or more expensive, then it's going to have an impact on foreign direct investment in our countries.
Now, CARICOM, in essence, was modeled off the structure of the European Union. So what's the message of Britain's exit from the EU? Could it serve as motivation for Caribbean countries to seek exit from CARICOM? Mr. Crawford says it's quite possible since CARICOM is more form than substance.
So the first thing in my view that the CARICOM region or the Caribbean region would have to do is to make up their mind. Do you want a substantive CARICOM arrangement or do you not? Look at the quarrel and the difficulties between Trinidad and Jamaica the other day, and all the problems that have been long held between all of us in the Caribbean. In a sense, CARICOM is a wishful dream because every little Caribbean country tends to want to do it solely and on their own. We haven't really gotten the message of unity together. So maybe what part of the message then coming from Brexit is that, okay, maybe you're better off being independent. The other thing that might happen, and what is being even discussed already, Britain having come out of the European Union may get involved in what is called a union of independent European nations. It means that they will be independent, free to negotiate with each other, to cooperate with each other, but not be bound by the rules and regulations of the EU, which was one of the real reasons why the Brits wanted to come out of the European Union. The big cry among many people in Britain today is that at long last, Britain is independent at long last, because they saw the European Union as a noose around their necks. It was costing them a lot of money. They had to deal with the realities and the costs and the laws and the regulations, which was driving certain people crazy. And when that happens and the British economy is not performing well, you can understand what gave the groundswell for the vote to come out of the European Union.
And Mr. Peterkin shares the view that Brexit could motivate CARICOM departures, noting that there are already signs of countries wanting to split from the regional group.
We have already had some rumblings from Jamaica that are saying that, the CARICOM thing is just not working. They're not getting enough benefit from it. They're very concerned about certain trade issues that have come up and had an impact on them. And you can begin to see a sentiment emerging that says, why should we be a member of CARICOM any longer? Maybe we can go and do a deal with Mexico and the US and Canada or some other group. And so, whatever the mechanism is for us to get out, and I'm not quite sure what it is. We have that experience in the EU. The EU does not seem to be a great model, and so we need to look at something else. So yeah, that's a dangerous potential impact, just like it is in Europe from a number of other countries that may want to follow the same thing that England did.
For CEEN Caribbean News, I'm Candice Ming.